Shall we start? Yes. Good evening, and I am Aisha Iqbal Vishamohan. I am your instructor for English language for competitive exams. So, I'm delighted to be with you, and I have some of your questions are here with me. Those of you who have already posted earlier, and some of you are still online and you're perhaps trying to connect. And yes, so good evening. Good evening to all of you, Neha, Abhishek, Harshita, Jai Shanti, and Ashwini. Good evening to all of you. Welcome. So this is our course, English language for competitive purposes, competitive exams. The motive or the objective of this course was to uh, to introduce our students about or with the intricacies of international as well as national level um, competitive exams, especially those kinds of exams that test our English. Not necessarily spoken English, but English grammar, English vocabulary, our ability to read and write, as well as perhaps a little bit of listening. So that was the objective of the course. I'm afraid we haven't been able to cover speaking. I know that it's very important to most of us, to all of you, to be, a very competent speaker of the English language. However, uh, it's not really a live course. We are not having one-to-one direct session. So I won't be able to, or I wasn't able to teach you how to speak or improve your spoken um, uh, abilities, but or speaking abilities. But uh, uh, what I can suggest, because this is a question that appears quite frequently: how do I speak? How do I improve my spoken English? How do you improve your spoken English? Say English is, and someone has also asked me a question like, why is it important to be fluent in language? So, what do you mean by being fluent? Does being fluent mean to you to be able to speak like native speakers of English? Who are the native speakers? People who are born in English speaking countries. For example, uh, the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So those are the native speakers of English language. People who are born in those countries where English is the first language. Now, for us, those of us who are born outside these countries, for example, in our own country, so we are not the native speakers. So don't think that just because you don't speak the way you find people in TV sitcoms like Friends or Big Bang Theory speaking. So if you can't speak like them, then you're not a good speaker. That's not the case. To be a good speaker of English language or any language, what does it require? So that you're clear, when you speak, you are making minimum mistakes in your vocabulary, in your choice of words, in your grammar. You are able to speak coherently and without making long pauses, unless and until you're a deep thinker. But that will show. Just because you cannot speak well and you are pausing, that does not automatically make you a philosopher or a deep thinker. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that just because you don't speak as fast, or your perhaps your pace is not as much as someone uh, who you admire a lot, perhaps from the native speaking countries, that doesn't necessarily mean that your English is not good enough. So get rid of those illusions that your English is not good enough. With little bit of practice, anyone can be good in any language. That's what I feel. Uh, There is a question by Ashok, and it says, "What are the rules of grammar?" Rules of grammar. mm, well, if you talk about written English or spoken English, so grammar. What is grammar? You have subject, verb, noun, pronoun. So those are the noun, pronoun, and verbs and adverbs and adjectives. So those are your parts of speech, right? I am speaking to a class. So I is a pronoun. Am speaking is my verb, and to a class. To is a preposition. A is an article. So these are the, and where to use and how to organize these bunch or cluster of words. That's what is meant by rules of grammar. Many people think that that those people or those who speak only in simple sentences, um, by simple sentences, like short simple sentences, so they are not very good users of English, perhaps. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you force yourself to speak and write lengthy sentences with lots of ands and buts and therefore and I know and you see, and then you keep on, because that also causes lot of incoherence and difficulty to your reader or listener. So rules of grammar, you have to one rule of grammar that most of us are aware of is the subject verb agreement. So where to keep, like there is a bottle on the table. So what is the subject, what is the verb, what is the object? So subject verb agreement. So these are the rules that you need to master. You also have something like active and passive voice. Now, the class is being taught by me. The water is being kept on the table. Do you like these sentences? And if you don't, then why not? Ask yourself. So one of the rules is to use active voice. I am drinking, I am speaking, the table is kept on the, sorry, the water bottle is kept on the table. So when this is another rule that try to use active sentence in your everyday speech, in your even your formal writing. You don't need to insert passive sentences just to impress anyone. Scientific reports are completely different matters altogether, because they do require use of passive constructions. So that is, those are the rules of grammar that I can think of. Attention to subject verb agreement, um, not to insert prepositions or articles where they are not used, they are not required, and simple and complex and compound sentences, be familiar with them, and use a variety of structures in in your spoken or in your written language. Active passive voice, we do not use active voice, sorry, passive voice in our everyday speech and in our writing. Most of our writing requires active voice, except in scientific reports, and we try to use active voice in our spoken English as far as possible. Some books, there is Dhananjay Kulkarni who is asking how to improve English and suggest some books. Uh, Dhananjay, now English language has become so complicated. Shouldn't be saying complicated, but then there are so many types of. Then the world has changed, and there are. If you are talking about English that would help you to crack an exam, then you have to read subject specific English, or if you are looking at certain kind of For example, vocation. So, English that should be used for nurses or in everyday technical communication or for business purposes. There are books of all kinds. I have floated a couple of other courses for our MOOC and PITL, and one of them is English for technical communication, which focuses on particularly on engineers and people who are more involved in the technical aspect of the English language. English for competitive exams is slightly different. We have used a lot of vocabulary and grammar and reading activities, as you can see very well, because those are the kinds of exercises that that students are asked when they appear for competitive exams. And there is a question, how to face exam. How to face exam as in a one-on-one, one-to-one exam, or when you are appearing for a job interview or for an exam where spoken English is tested. Let me just tell you that for most exams that test your spoken English, you need to be a confident user of English. You need to prepare well. Before going for any exam, you have to do your homework. You should at least know the format of the exam. So there are so many training institutes that deal with specifically uh, different kinds of exams. So the best way to approach, because I don't really understand how to uh, face an exam and which exam do you mean. But if you're perhaps speaking to a machine, as in a TOEFL exam, TOEFL doesn't give you perhaps another chance to ask for an explanation. A live interviewer will give you a chance, but when you speak into a machine, then you won't get the chance. So it all depends. What I'm trying to tell you is that you should be familiar with the format of the exam. How many sections is this exam divided into, and how can you crack that exam, and how would you mm, what are the intricacies and what are the uh, necessary things that you should be ready with. How can I improve my English along with my engineering courses? One loses a grip over their language and how to manage that. I am aware that when you are too much into your specific subject, then you tend to lose grip. But there are always options. See, uh, for today's generation, learning in the English language shouldn't be so difficult because we are surrounded with English. We are surrounded with English all. We have English all around us, and um, wherever we go, we encounter English, especially in this in this era of technology. So we have so much of English happening all over. All you need to do is perhaps read a good English language newspaper or films, of course, but then films taught you very different kind of, films may teach you very different kinds of language. So there are lots of slang and there are lots of very regional specific kind of English language that you may not need unless and until you are very competent. The films may not be such a good idea, but yeah, listening to the radio. Uh, Once upon a time, people would listen to sports commentary and improve their English. So that is certainly helps in improving your ability to understand pronunciation, your vocabulary, and perhaps even fluency. How do writers use a rich vocabulary mm, and publish a book? How to write a book, basically. If you're talking about creative writers, rich vocabulary does not necessarily mean lengthy words for which you have to uh, look up the word in a dictionary all the time. Ernest Hemingway, the great American writer, is known for, and he was very prolific. He wrote a number of, he was also a journalist, so he wrote a number of articles as well as several works of fiction. The Sun Also Rises, Farewell to the Arms, um, For Whom the Bell Tolls, uh, The Killers. So, all these are great works by Ernest Hemingway. And for Hemingway, it has been said that one never had to use a dictionary while reading Hemingway. So Hemingway is, and he won the Nobel Prize. So remember that you need not necessarily use rich words as you call them, but if you even if you use everyday words or everyday language, you can write a book. Um, for creative writing, if your question pertains to that specifically, I would suggest that you start writing. If you haven't been able to find a publisher now, or as of now, the best way is to write a blog and start developing your um, language skills. And very soon you will find, I mean, if you have something interesting to say, then people will start reading you, and that will give you a lot of confidence. Maybe you won't earn a lot, but that will definitely add to your confidence, and perhaps that may motivate you to write a book. You will at least be able to network better, people will know you, you will be able to approach the right people. All right. Yeah. They help us to know the question pattern of, yeah, ELC. You don't have to worry too much. You have been doing the assignments, and we are going to ask multiple choice questions for your final exam also. While reading newspapers, one amasses huge vocabulary. But how can I add words to my everyday vocabulary and make sentences lucid and concise? It's not that difficult. I have seen people who can write extremely well. Uh, there are certain exams that expect you to write 500 words in 1 hour, and they are able to write that. How do they do that? Um, Schooling matters, however, uh, if you haven't been exposed to lot of English language around you, then you have to find ways to introduce or to bring English to yourself, I mean, to your door. That's the only advice I can give you. So, if you want to write better, speak better, you have to surround yourself with the language. You have to give yourself the right amount of exposure. Otherwise, how would you learn? A course, especially an online course, can be useful only if you're doing a lot of self study. So, if you're motivated enough, I'm sure you will write every day, you will read every day, and you will find that you are able to absorb and imbibe a lot of structures, sentence patterns, words, vocabulary that you can use in your perhaps professional writing, or your when you're appearing for an exam, or in your everyday spoken or written language. Again, there is a question about the pattern. So pattern is multiple choice question, the way you have been doing your assignments. Is it necessary to look grammatical structure while speaking? Well, when you think of your mother tongue, you will realize that you don't think about whether you're using a simple sentence or complex sentence or compound sentence. However, uh, when you are looking at a foreign language or second language such as English, then a little bit of uh, attention or sensitivity to the structures is important, because that's not the language you are born with. So, yeah, attention to that, or a little bit of alertness towards grammatical structure is always important, because if you start speaking and you're making a one lapse every sentence, then it may be stressful to the people who are listening to you. You're not a good speaker. So there's always a leeway. We can give a leeway to people who make some errors, but not to those people who make frequent errors and several errors, so that your communication becomes difficult. Um, you need not worry about getting a lot of scores in the exam that in the course that you are taking, because see, this course is sort of preparing you to appear for more competitive exams. So the kinds of assignments that we have developed, they are definitely meant to challenge you. This is not a course, a simple course like English for communication or English for technical communication. Those are uh, more those are simpler courses. Those courses just aim to develop your day-to-day English, and particularly in communicative situations, and that's about it. Perhaps increase your technical vocabulary, or give you or teach you certain kinds of formats and patterns to know the to write reports and more technical kinds of writings. So that's it. But when we talk about competitive exams, we are talking about international exams as well. GRE, many people appear for GRE, for SET, and also our national level competitive exams. So, what are the requirements? Is that the vocabulary is definitely not simple. Trust me, it becomes things get very difficult, and people find it difficult to very hard to attain the required marks. So the course aims to assist those people who are aiming for such kind of difficult exams. So definitely is going to be difficult, and your scores, we are so worried about your scores, so you have to just take the entire thing in very positive spirit. Take it as a way of learning, improving your English. And even if you're not scoring very well, don't let that dishearten you. Learn for life, not just for these 3 4 months and then forget all about it. Even if you are able to retain 60 70% of the vocabulary, the grammatical structures, you should think that yes, you have been successful. So that's what is more important, not the immediate rewards, but look at your long term rewards. One way to be able to speak continuously in English without pauses, without faltering um, after every word, is to uh, interact in English with those who are interested in improving their own English. If you hang around with a group of friends or people who revert to mother tongue, native language after one sentence or two sentences, so how are you going to pick up fluency? That's a difficult thing. Any suggestions for essay writing? I am not too sure for which level. So please, could you be more specific? Essay writing for which level? And very people who want to improve their spellings. Uh, so, well, if you really want to improve your spelling, but the question is for what? I mean, are you appearing for some exam? Are you a school student? Are you a college student? So for UPSC essay writing, all right, there are books. By UPSC, do you mean civil services? So if you mean civil services, if that's the exam that you want to crack, then there are plenty of books in the market. And UPSC kind of or style of essays and essay topics are very different. Yeah. For example, uh, let's say an idea that changed the world, or what happened to democracy, and then you have to sit and discuss it for perhaps whatever is the given word limit. So yes, it is. There are books. I think the market is full of good books. What I would suggest, because you're asking for a very specific kind of an exam, a UPSC, and kind of qualities required to write a good essay for exam like UPSC. The publishers matter. So for UPSC kinds of books, let's say there are 50 books in the market, and you want to buy only one book, and you want the best book that is possible. Then, in that case, go for the publisher. The better the publisher, the more reputed the publisher, the better, the more learning will take. And the better it would be for you. So it's important to look at the name of the publisher. Don't go just by the title. Learn English in 50 days, 30 days, or 60 days. You can't learn anything in 60 days. It is always a constant and continuous process. English movies help to improve English speaking to some extent, not to because in English movies nowadays with special effects and VFX and SFX, where do you find good dialogues or good conversation? There's very little of it. In television sitcoms, for example, I just mentioned The Big Bang Theory or Friends, or even other, perhaps some of you like to watch Hunger Games and Game of Thrones. So perhaps there is lot of language. Perhaps there is language. At least you will be able to understand the native pronunciation. That also matters, and maybe gradually that will help you to speak uh, um, in a way that your pronunciation improves. So in that way, you can say that watching movies may help, but I don't think that watching English movies will really or can really help anyone to develop in the spoken English abilities. Most students had a who had a good exposure of English while schooling. How can we brush up our grammar? For instance, tenses. Please suggest a plan or guide. Okay, so I would suggest one basic book which is called High School Grammar, English Grammar by Wren and Martin. Wren, Wren, Martin, Martin. It's a classic book, and it comes with a key book, you know, mm, uh, answer key. So there are lots of exercises given, and there are so many. There plenty of grammatical exercises. It is one of the best books ever on basic English grammar and basic English usage. So if you think that uh, you didn't get much reinforcement while you were in school, then start practicing grammar using Wren and Martin. Root words. How to understand meaning. Give me an example. There is a question like how to understand meaning of word from root words. Can you give me an example? There is a question on how to improve communication skills. See, communication is, or any language has um, a number of parts to it, aspects to it, or modules to it. So you have the speaking, reading, listening, and writing. Grammar and vocabulary, they are intrinsic part of these four modules. How to improve? If you don't have basic vocabulary, if you don't have basic grammar, or you don't have understanding of grammatical structures, then how will you proceed with the rest of the with the rest of the modules? So a good way to start, if you have very little, if you think that you have your competence is very limited, then you have to start with a good basic book. And Ren and Martin, in my opinion, is one of the best books for beginners. And when you come to a slightly more advanced level, then there is Advanced English Grammar by Martin Huings, Hewings, Martin Huings. So it's called Advanced English Grammar. That it also comes, I think, with an answer key, and there are plenty of exercises. Your verbal ability in CAT exam can also be mm, tackled. If you know the grammar well, then Martin Hewings is very good for competitive kinds of exams. And for improving your CAT, see, if you start looking up books that deal with GRE and SAT kind of vocabulary, it will definitely help your CAT exam also, CAT exam also. How to learn phrases? If you read, idioms and phrases will come naturally to you. Although there are books of quotations also. I have seen excellent users of English language carrying around books of English quotations, quotations by the greatest of English American writers, and even writers from foreign languages, from other languages like French and German and Italian. So those are the kind of, if you want to reach those heights, then you have to spend some time. Net, of course, is an excellent source of quotations. All you have to just key in a word, a concept. For example, if you want to know or express yourself on the topic of responsibility, just key in responsibility and quotations, and you will get a number of quotations and phrases and idioms. If you want to look at a concept like silence or forgiveness, all you have to do is to key in those words and write quotations. Forgiveness quotations, or quotations on forgiveness, phrases on uh, related to forgiveness, you will come across. So perhaps that's a good way to be. And of course, reading books always helps. That's the best way to improve. Again, how to improve my writing skills? See, one way, because this question keeps coming back, how to improve your communication skills, or how do we improve writing skills? Yeah, let's go on to do this one first. So writing skills can be improved when you write, when you ask someone you think who is a very good writer, or who has a good level of competence in English language. So check your writing, but then you can also start blogging. And if you blog continuously, systematically, then it will definitely add fluency to your writing. When you will be able to think fast, write fast, it also helps in the long run your spoken English abilities. Uh, by root word, if you feel that how to go to the well, conceit, what is the root word here? We cannot break the word into conceive and deceive. That's not the way to understand it. But Conceive goes to traces its root back to Italian and Latin and sometimes even French words. So those are the origins. You do not have to think that far out, that back in time. Okay, so I will give you something simpler. Um, a word like irresponsible. So you have responsible is the word. Okay, so concern yourself with the word responsible. Now you want to say that someone has not been very careful in discharging their duties. Use the word irresponsible. You're adding a suffix ir, irresponsible, right? And when you say I am a person who can shoulder a lot of responsibility, then again you're changing the word by adding something extra, and you're also changing the class of the word. So from adjective it's turned, you're turning it to a noun. Responsibility is a concept. So that's the way to improve your vocabulary. You should not worry too much about tracing the origin and the root of the word. If you want to improve spoken English and avoid fillers during speaking, it's not all that easy. If you practice a lot, and if particularly you're in a setup or in surroundings where you are able to get plenty of exposure and opportunities to express yourself. That's one way to improve your spoken English. What is the mode for appearing for final exams? You will be told. Now, some of you have a question on how to submit assignments and assignment links. You can perhaps address this query to our mm, to the discussion forum, and we will respond to you. We will guide you how to submit assignments, and don't worry about appearing for the final exam. NPTEL MOOC team is extremely responsible. We were just using the word responsible. So they are very responsible in making announcements, such important announcements regarding exams and deadlines, and also stick to that. We will be guiding you. Don't worry about the exam pattern. Exam pattern is the same as your assignment pattern. Gate verbal ability. Uh, well, you go through the course, but then also you look at certain books which are gate specific. And I think that would help. As I already suggested, go by the name of the publisher. If it's the publisher is a very credible and known publisher, it's a good company, then always it helps, it works, rather than um, just picking any book randomly. There is a question: what is the difference between home and house? Essentially none, but then if you look at it in depth, then house is a structure, is a physical being. Home is also a concept. A home comprises people or things or objects which are very near or dear to you. Um, Often we say that um, the house turned into a home. Home is a feeling that you get, of a certain kind of a feeling when you enter that house. So the homely feeling. So home has the concept of the construct of feeling attached to it. House is a physical structure. Objective questions, yeah, but you will also have a lot of reading, descriptive reading, but you're not expected to write essays. Even when you read a lengthy passage in this exam, questions would be objective. Sometimes more than one answer appears. Yeah, these are the tricks that examiners play. And this is the way to score high marks in your exams. How to choose the correct answer. So you have to be very sensitive to the nuances of the English language. Otherwise, many answers would, in MCQ and objective types, many answers, responses will strike you as correct, but there's always only one answer which is right, right? So you have to be sensitive to that. General English and then general language is more everyday basic communication. Technical language is more related to, there's a question, English, how is English different in general language and technical language? If you're speaking in general situations, that means everyday situation. You go to the market, let's say you're in an English speaking country or in a big city, and you go to this supermarket and um, you have bought certain items and you are paying, so you have to talk to the receptionist, to the cashier in functional English, right? So you are fulfilling a function. You go to a restaurant, you need to order, you place an order, so that's another situation. So that's general English. Technical English, when you make a technical specific kind of a presentation, it could even be a business situation, right? So perhaps you are a marketing person. Now the kind of language or grammar, um, or sentences or phrases that you use while marketing, or while you're in sales, or while you're making a very technical kind of presentation to your boss. So that is very different from the kind of language that you would be using at a restaurant while placing an order, or while at a department store while you're paying your bills. So that's the difference between general language and technical language. When you talk to large audience, is it okay to be casual? I don't think so, especially when you don't know the people. For instance, when you see the same group of students every day, I'm talking about real, not virtual, but real audience every day. You meet them outside the classroom, you meet them somewhere on campus. You can afford to be a little casual in your approach, not in your teaching, of course, but in your approach. You can relax a bit. But when you're talking to a large audience, particularly in something in very official, very professional situation, I don't think it's a very good advice that you become casual about it. What is casual? I mean, if you mean I want to be relaxed, yes, fine. But if you think that you can use casual language, you can use slang, and you bring in your everyday speech there, then that's not a very good idea. It won't leave a good impression on your listeners, on your audience. So yes, always use your words and your language according to the situation. The way we speak to our family members at home is very different to the way we speak to our colleagues in our offices, especially to our managers and bosses. The way we send emails to our friends or relatives or cousins is very different to the way we send our statement of purpose to a foreign university. Professors will be reading, experts will be reading the write ups. You cannot afford to use casual and slang and language with emoticons or uh, playful symbols. You cannot afford to do that. So, therefore, these are the subtle distinctions that you should bear in mind when you are speaking and writing. Always remember this question: who are you talking to? Who is your audience? Who is your reader? And it all depends on that. If you want to adapt a casual approach to your speaking or your writing, then you have to understand or you have to recognize who your readers are, who your interlocutors or your listeners are. In comprehension questions, is it advisable to write answers by copying passage, or should we form our own sentences? It's always good, always better to write, use the same idea. So your response has to be accurate. You can't use your own, you can't walk away with your own response of your own idea. So idea has to be basically the same. However, language can be a little different. So don't copy the exact words, the exact language as given in the passage. Make a change here and there, but the idea should remain without damaging the basic idea, basic meaning of the sentence. There is a question on GRE set exams and can I prepare that by self study? I don't think so. I mean, self study helps, of course, it's very important. But if you join a coaching center or even online, if you start looking up some online coaching or exercises, that will at least give you a lot of um, confidence and familiarity with the structure and format of the exam, because otherwise there is always a danger if you come from a kind of background where these exams are very new to the entire setup. You are not very familiar with the pattern of the exam. It is always better. See, I'm not asking you to go to coaching centers and spend money, but coaching centers give you some practice, some kind of practice exams, mock exams. So that kind of builds up your confidence. That sort of builds up your speed. Okay, because they will force you to write an essay within a stipulated time limit, and you will be able to do that because they are asking you to do. And you see other students who are able to sort of uh, measure your competence accordingly. So that is important. So some kind of a structure and familiarity with pattern and format is extremely important. So perhaps online coaching if you don't want to attend coaching centers. Out and out self study only if you're a very confident user of the English language. Yeah, sometimes it's possible to guess the answer by is or are, or sometimes even the use of article a, an, and the. So if you can guess the answer, then it's well and good. That means you are on the way of becoming a very competent user of the English language. What should we do to improve our essay writing skills for admission in universities abroad? I'm not too sure what kind of essays are Are you talking about competitive exams that you have to first appear for a particular, for example, TOEFL has a writing, TOEFL requires, and also set, they require you to write an essay. So perhaps, yeah, so how do we improve our essay writing skills? There are exam specific books. What I am doing in this course, I am giving you a general framework, general guidelines, and some of the vocabulary that is taught in this course, some of the grammar structure and reading comprehension passages are tough, but they are almost akin to the kind of questions that are asked in these very tough kinds of exams. And also remember that it's not just enough to know how to write an essay or to use good language. Perhaps you are very good. Perhaps you are a very good user of the English language. You are very competent, but you should also be able to time yourself, because they are not going to stop for you. They are not going to wait for you. So if it says it's 20 minutes response, then you have to submit. Otherwise, it's all gone. The screen goes blank. What are you going to do about it? So you have to uh, uh, develop some good learning, good study habits in order to crack these exams. There's a question. Students in India read, write, and follow the British accent. I don't think they are doing that anymore. Much of the current generation is heavily influenced by the American way of uh, language. But when we read the same sentence in US, it is likely to be a different one, though the content which is expected to deliver being same. So I'm facing difficulty in this. Now, you may think that British accent, yeah, British accent is quite different from American accent, which is a fact. I mean, there is no argument over that. So people who are working or studying in the US system, okay, they take a little more time to get habituated, accustomed to their accent, which is a fact. We can't do anything about it. I mean, studying in India and then going and working in the US, it would take time. It does take time to get habituated with the US system, especially with the accent and also their slang and idiom. Uh, they are quite different. A question is, what do you mean by English for competitive competition exams? It's English for competitive exams. The idea is to introduce students to certain exams where they will be tested a lot on their reading comprehension and also on their vocabulary and grammar. See, people who appear for exams like SAT and CAT and GRE, I can only give these examples. So there is, they are quite vocabulary and grammar driven, grammar centric, vocabulary centric, and also a lot of reading comprehension. So the purpose behind floating this course was to help those who are planning to appear for these exams. Should we use English, UK English spellings in US English exams? Well, that's a very contentious territory. I'm very sure that US English exams, they expect us to use their their structures, their spellings. So if you are appearing for a US English exam, then it's better to stick to that format. There's a question on how to be proficient in grammar. I have already given you several examples, and pronunciation. Uh, Pronunciation. I would suggest that rather than getting very confused with books on pronunciation, it's better to listen to those who speak good English. For example, if you have a university professor who speaks very good English, or the best way, news readers, you go to these news channels, BBC for example. If you tune into BBC and you listen to the news reader, I'm very sure soon you will start understanding the British accent, the native speaker's accent as they call it. And it will also help you in identifying the correct pronunciation. Perhaps we have been perhaps we are not familiar, we know the word, but we don't know what is the exact pronunciation. But if you listen to a native speaker, and again I can give you example of a BBC news reader. Why BBC? Well, is British, and as we keep talking about, it's their language after all. Even that's not to say that Indians don't use very good English, but rather than pointing out examples from our situations, I would say if you listen to a BBC news reader, perhaps that would be a very good way to start getting acquainted with the, because the question is on grammar and pronunciation. Yeah, so that's a good way. How to find, how to gain more vocabulary? uh, Reading. So start with the newspapers that you are most comfortable with. The Hindu paper from our part of the world, from our country, is one of the best. It has very good vocabulary, quite good standard of grammar. I think that is one good way of improving your vocabulary. And reading books. Okay, so not just self-help books, but also try to uh, read those books which you know is sure to have good English. Okay, so self-help books are deliberately written in a way to make things very accessible and very easy. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what you're looking for, then fine. But then that's not going to help you crack your CAT exam or your GRE level of exams, or as someone has mentioned, SSB exam. So these are very specific kind of exams, and you need to read more complex books. So your reading has to improve, definitely. Someone says practically reading of dictionary isn't possible to improve your vocabulary, but then why not? I would say that if you own a good dictionary, for example, Oxford English Dictionary, Advanced English Learners Dictionary, that's the language, that's the dictionary I keep referring to throughout the course. Um, if you just flip through it, what's the harm? No one is asking you to memorize a dictionary cover to cover. That's not feasible, possible. And of course, who has the time for doing that? But why not have a dictionary at home and time to time, occasionally flip through it? Wherever the page opens, start looking at it. See, you have to make a beginning, you have to start somewhere. There's a question. I have been preparing, but I'm not able to clear a single exam. So please tell me what should be my strategy for bank exams and etc. Um, well, I'm sure there are these banks, particular these PO kinds of exams. They have books, specific books related to that. But then you have to expand your reading. Definitely, without that, it's going to be very difficult to just. And it's not going to be a 1 week practice. It's not going to. It won't happen if you are just banking on 1 week or 10 days and you take vacation from whatever you're doing and say, okay, next week is my exam, now I'm going to prepare. Things don't happen that way. You have to practice. People take years, so be patient and practice well. So thank you so much, and it was wonderful being with you. Keep watching the videos and keep submitting the assignments. Any problem with the links, you please send us a mail at the discussion forum. Thank you. Okay, Karthik. So I'll go.
Ah, yes.